Part 1. The Unexpected Encounter. The plasma round screamed through the crimson sky of Zarian Prime, leaving trails of superheated air that made the battlefield shimmer like a fever dream. Commander Zarathek of the Valdorian Empire crouched behind, the twisted remains of a combat mech, her breathing controlled despite the chaos surrounding her. Her elongated fingers gripped the pulse rifle with practiced ease, its weight familiar after decades of warfare across 17 star systems. The human colony had been putting up more resistance than anticipated. Intelligence reports had suggested these pink-skinned creatures would fold within hours, but 3 days had passed and they still fought with a desperation that bordered on madness. Zara's violet eyes, adapted for the dim light of her homeworld, could see clearly through the smoke and debris. Her enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of movement even over the constant explosions and weapon fire. She had killed 43 humans in the past 2 days. Each death was calculated, efficient, and necessary for the Empire's expansion. The Valdorians were apex predators, evolved from pack hunters on a world where only the strongest survived. War was not just their profession, it was their nature. A shadow moved between the wreckage of what had once been a human transport vehicle. Zara adjusted her position, bringing her rifle to bear on the target. Through her scope, she could see a human male, probably in his 30s by their species standards. He wore the standard-issue combat gear of the Colonial Defense Force, but something was wrong. His hands were empty. Zara blinked her inner eyelids, thinking her enhanced vision had malfunctioned. But no. The human was definitely unarmed. His weapon belt was there, fully loaded with ammunition and grenades, but his primary rifle was nowhere to be seen. Perhaps it had been damaged or lost in the fighting. The human moved with purpose, not the panicked scrambling she had come to expect from his kind when caught in the open. He seemed to be heading directly toward her position, though it was impossible that he could have detected her. Valdorian stealth technology was centuries ahead of anything these primitive beings possessed. She tracked him through her scope, finger resting lightly on the trigger. The shot would be simple, center mass, quick death. The human would never know what hit him, but something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was curiosity or maybe the warrior's instinct that had kept her alive through countless battles. This human was different. The man suddenly stopped and turned directly toward her hiding place. There, eyes met across 50 meters of devastated ground, and Zara felt something she had not experienced in years: surprise. The human's gaze was steady, unafraid. He raised one hand slowly, not in surrender, but in what appeared to be a greeting. Then he spoke, his voice carrying clearly across the battlefield despite the ongoing chaos around them. "I know you're there, warrior. Will you face me?" Zara's grip tightened on her weapon. How had he detected her? Human senses were notoriously inferior to those of most spacefaring species. Their technology was primitive, their tactics crude. Yet this one had found her when seasoned Valdorian scouts had failed to do so in the past. The human took a step forward, still making no move toward his weapons. "My name is Marcus Chen. I've been watching you fight for 2 days. You're skilled, honorable in your kills. You don't torture, don't take unnecessary risks with civilian lives. You're a true warrior." Zara's secondary heart began beating faster, pumping additional blood to her combat muscles. This was either an elaborate trap, or the human had lost his mind. No rational being would approach a Valdorian warrior in the open, especially while unarmed. "I propose single combat," Marcus continued, now only 30 meters away. "You and me. Winner takes this sector. The loser's forces withdraw." Now Zara was certain the human had suffered some kind of mental breakdown. Single combat was an ancient tradition among her people, reserved for matters of honor and territorial disputes between equals. Humans were not equals. They were a recently spacefaring species, barely out of their home system. The idea that one would challenge a Valdorian to single combat was absurd. Yet something in the human's stance, in the way he carried himself, reminded her of the old ways. Before the Empire, before the vast fleets and planet-killing weapons, Valdorians had settled disputes through personal combat. The strongest led, the weak followed, and honor meant more than mere victory. Zara found herself standing, her rifle lowered but ready. You are either very brave or very stupid, human. Probably both, Marcus replied with what appeared to be their species equivalent of a threat display, baring their teeth. Zara had learned this was actually called a smile and indicated amusement rather than aggression. But I notice you haven't shot me yet. I am. Curious, Zara admitted, stepping out from behind her cover. Her 7-foot frame dwarfed the human, and her naturally armored hide gleamed dully in the alien sunlight. You challenge me while unarmed. Do you wish to die quickly? I'm not unarmed, Marcus said, tapping his temple with one finger. I have everything I need up here. The question is whether you're warrior enough to face someone who won't use your tools. Zara felt a flush of anger, at the implied insult, but also something else, intrigue. In all her years of warfare, no opponent had ever deliberately handicapped themselves. The tactical advantage would be entirely hers. She could end this in seconds with a single shot. Yet the human seemed confident, even eager. Very well, she said, setting her rifle aside and drawing her ceremonial blade. If you wish to die with honor, I will grant that wish. But as Marcus settled into a combat stance she didn't recognize, Zara realized that everything she thought she knew about humans might be wrong. The way he moved, the way he positioned himself, the complete absence of fear in his eyes, this was not the behavior of prey. For the first time in her military career, Commander Zarathek wondered if she had made a mistake. Part 2. The Warrior's Code. The weight of her ceremonial blade felt strange in Zara's hand after days of relying on energy weapons. The curved metal, forged in the ancient way on her homeworld of Valdor, had been blessed by the high priests and carried her family's honor for 3 generations. She had not drawn it in actual combat for over a decade. Across from her, the human called Marcus maintained his unusual stance. His feet were positioned at odd angles, his hands open and relaxed at his sides. Every instinct Zara possessed screamed that this was wrong. Warriors faced each other with weapons ready, muscles coiled for the strike. This human looked almost casual, as if they were about to engage in conversation rather than mortal combat. Zara's mind raced back to her youth in the war academies of Valdor. She had been exceptional even among her naturally gifted people, mastering 17 different weapon forms before her 15th year. Her instructors had called her a prodigy, destined for greatness in the Empire's endless campaigns of expansion. She had learned that superior technology, combined with superior genetics and superior training, made the Valdorians the rightful rulers of the galaxy. The lesser species, the soft humans, the fragile Zenithians, the slow-thinking Korthak, existed to serve or be swept aside. It was the natural order, as inevitable as gravity or stellar formation. The strong conquered, the weak submitted. There was no shame in it, merely the universe operating as it should. Yet here stood this human, challenging everything she had been taught. Marcus had not simply refused to surrender or fight desperately like a cornered animal. He had actually issued a formal challenge, using terms that suggested familiarity with Valdorian customs. More disturbing still, he had done so while deliberately limiting his own capabilities. You hesitate, Marcus observed, his voice calm. Are you reconsidering? Zara's crest flared with indignation. I do not hesitate. I attempt to understand your madness. You face a Valdorian blade master with empty hands. Your death is certain. Maybe, Marcus said with that strange tooth-bearing expression again. But you're thinking about it, aren't you? Wondering how I could be so confident. Wondering what you might be missing. She was thinking about it, and that fact disturbed her greatly. In the war academies, they had studied hundreds of species and their combat techniques. Humans were classified as Category 7, minimal threat, reliant on technology rather than natural ability. Their reflexes were slow, their strength limited, their senses dull. They possessed no natural weapons, no armor, no enhanced healing. They were, by every measure that mattered, inferior warriors. So why did every combat instinct she possessed warn her that this human was dangerous? Zara began to circle, her blade held in the traditional middle guard position. Marcus turned with her, maintaining distance but showing no sign of attempting to flee or reach for a weapon. His movements were fluid, economical. There was no wasted energy, no unnecessary tension in his muscles. I have fought across 17 systems, Zara said, partly to unnerve her opponent and partly to reassure herself. I have faced the plasma claw beasts of Kepler-9, the acid spitters of the Helix Nebula, the hive minds of the Outer Rim. I have never been defeated in single combat. Impressive, Marcus replied, and he seemed genuinely respectful rather than mocking. How many of those victories came from superior weapons and technology? The question struck her like a physical blow. It was not something she had ever considered. The Empire's doctrine was clear. Use every advantage, exploit every weakness, victory by any means necessary. Only the result mattered, not the method. But as she thought about it, Zara realized that most of her victories had indeed relied heavily on technological superiority. Better armor, faster weapons, superior communications, and intelligence. When had she last faced an opponent on truly equal terms? Strength is strength, she said, but the words felt hollow. The Empire succeeds because we are better. Better at making tools, Marcus agreed. But what happens when the tools are taken away? What's left? Zara's grip tightened on her blade. You speak of philosophy while death approaches. Do humans always waste time with words before they die? We talk because thinking is what humans do best, Marcus said. It's our weapon, our armor, our shield. Every other species in the galaxy is stronger than us, faster than us, better armed than us. But we're still here. That was true, Zara realized with uncomfortable surprise. Humans had only achieved faster-than-light travel 60 years ago, making them one of the youngest spacefaring species in known space. Yet they had established colonies across dozens of systems, survived first contact with multiple alien civilizations, and even fought the mighty Valdorian Empire to a standstill on several worlds. How had such a primitive species accomplished so much? You're trying to confuse me, she said, raising her blade to attack position. It will not work. I'm trying to show you something, Marcus replied. Your people are warriors, I respect that. But you've forgotten what it means to truly fight. You've become dependent on your advantages. Zara lunged forward with lightning speed, her blade describing a perfect arc toward Marcus's center mass. It was a killing strike, delivered with the precision of decades of training and the enhanced reflexes of her species. No human could possibly react in time. Marcus was not there. She spun, confused, and saw him standing 3 feet to her left. He had not dodged in any direction she could identify. One moment he had been in front of her blade, the next he was simply elsewhere. How? She demanded. I read your intentions in the shift of your weight, the angle of your shoulders, the direction of your gaze. Marcus explained patiently. Your body told me where you were going to strike before you committed to the movement. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. That should have been impossible. Humans were supposed to have inferior senses and slower reflexes. They could not possibly process information quickly enough to predict and counter Valdorian combat techniques, unless they were using a completely different approach to fighting. She attacked again, this time with a series of rapid cuts designed to overwhelm any defense. Each strike was perfectly executed, each transition flawless. It was a demonstration of skill that would have impressed her instructors at the War Academy. Marcus flowed around every attack like water around stone. He never seemed to move quickly, never appeared to exert himself, yet her blade never found its target. It was as if he existed in the spaces between her strikes, always present but never where her weapon could reach. For the first time in her adult life, Commander Zarathek began to doubt everything she thought she knew about warfare. Part 3. The human way. Marcus Chen had been 12 years old when he first learned that weapons could make you weaker. The memory surfaced as he continued to evade Zara's increasingly frustrated attacks. He had been in his 3rd year at the Colonial Defense Academy on New Shanghai, struggling with standard combat training. His instructors had been kind but firm. He was too slow, too weak, too small to be an effective soldier. They had suggested he consider technical training instead, communications, engineering, support roles where his intellectual abilities could be better utilized. That night, he had called his grandfather on Earth, tears streaming down his face as he admitted his failures. Grandfather Chen had listened quietly, then told him a story about a different kind of strength. In ancient China, the old man had said, there lived a philosopher named Laozi. He taught that water was the strongest thing in the world, not because it was hard, but because it was soft. Water does not fight the rock, it flows around it. Eventually the rock is worn away, but the water remains. His grandfather had been a practitioner of Taijiquan, an ancient martial art that few people remembered in the age of energy weapons and powered armor. The next time Marcus had leave, he had traveled back to Earth to learn. The supreme excellence, his grandfather had taught him, consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting. The skilled warrior wins without battle, takes without fighting, conquers without bloodshed. For 10 years, Marcus had studied not just the physical movements but the philosophy behind them. He learned to read an opponent's intentions through subtle shifts in posture and breathing. He discovered how to use an enemy's strength against them, how to find balance in movement, how to remain calm in the center of chaos. Most importantly, he learned that true strength came not from the weapon in your hand, but from the clarity of your mind. When he returned to active duty, his fellow soldiers had mocked his new training methods. They called him dancer and mystic, laughing as he practiced slow, flowing movements while they drilled with plasma rifles and sonic grenades. His superiors tolerated his eccentricities because his tactical analysis had improved dramatically, but they still expected him to carry standard weapons into combat. Marcus had other ideas. Now, facing this alien warrior whose speed and strength far exceeded human limits, he felt the familiar calm settling over him like a comfortable blanket. Zara was magnificent, a perfect example of her species' martial prowess. Her blade work was flawless, her reflexes incredible, her power undeniable. Any human who tried to match her strength for strength would die in seconds. But Marcus was not trying to match her strength. Instead, he read the language of her body like a book written in motion. The slight tensing of her left shoulder that preceded a horizontal cut, the shift in her stance that indicated a thrust, the way her eyes focused just before she committed to an attack. Each movement was preceded by dozens of subtle tells that her body broadcast unconsciously. Zara's next attack was a complex combination, a feint high followed by a real thrust low, then a spinning slice aimed at his midsection. Marcus had seen her telegraph the entire sequence in the gradual repositioning of her feet and the rhythm of her breathing. He stepped into the attack rather than away from it, moving to the inside of her guard where her long blade could not reach effectively. For a moment they were close enough that he could see the confusion in her violet eyes. Then he was past her, having used her own forward momentum to carry him beyond her reach. "Stand still and fight," Zara snarled, whirling to face him again. "I am fighting," Marcus replied calmly. "Just not the way you expect, it was true." While he carried no traditional weapons, Marcus was never truly unarmed. His weapons were patience, observation, and understanding. He used the environment around them, the scattered debris of the battlefield, the uneven ground, the shifting patterns of light and shadow. When Zara attacked, he allowed the terrain to channel her strikes away from him. When she pursued, he used obstacles to break her line of attack. "Your style is defensive," Zara observed, pausing to reassess her approach. "You cannot win by running forever." "Can't I?" Marcus asked. "You're already breathing harder. Your attacks are becoming less precise. How long can you maintain this pace?" Zara's crest flattened against her skull in what Marcus had learned was a sign of anger among her people. But she was also intelligent enough to recognize the truth in his words. Her species was built for overwhelming force, for quick, decisive victories. Extended combat drained their energy reserves rapidly. "You seek to tire me out," she said. "A coward strategy." "A water strategy," Marcus corrected. "I'm not trying to break you with force. I'm trying to show you a different way of thinking about conflict." "And what way is that?" Zara demanded, though she did not attack again immediately. "That the greatest victory is the one where nobody has to die," Marcus said. "That understanding your enemy is more powerful than destroying them. That sometimes the strongest thing you can do is refuse to fight on their terms." Zara laughed, a harsh sound like breaking glass. "Pretty words from a species that is about to lose their colony. Your philosophy will not save your people when our reinforcements arrive." "Maybe not," Marcus admitted, "but it might save some of yours." The alien warrior's expression shifted to one of puzzlement. "Explain." Marcus gestured to the devastation around them, the burned buildings, the crater-marked ground, the smoke rising from a dozen fires.
"How many of your soldiers have died taking this city?"
"How many more will die if this fighting continues? Your people are warriors, but they're also someone's children, someone's parents. Don't their lives have value too?" For a moment, Zara's blade lowered slightly. Marcus saw something flicker across her features. Not weakness, but perhaps the beginning of doubt. "You speak of mercy to a Valdorian," she said, but her voice lacked its earlier certainty. We are conquerors. We take what we need to survive and grow strong. And where does it end? Marcus asked. When you've conquered every world, defeated every enemy, what then? What happens to a warrior people when there are no more wars to fight? Zara's blade trembled almost imperceptibly. It was a question that Marcus suspected few Valdorians had ever been asked, and one that struck at the heart of their entire civilization. Enough talk, she said, raising her weapon again, but Marcus could see that his words had taken root. The seed of doubt was planted, and like water on stone, it would eventually wear away even the hardest certainty. Part 4. The art of not fighting. The battle around them had begun to shift. Marcus noticed it first in the changing patterns of weapon fire, the way the sound of combat was moving farther from their position. Other soldiers, both human and Valdorian, were being drawn to their duel like moths to flame. A circle of witnesses was forming at the edges of the debris field. Weapons lowered as they watched something unprecedented unfold. Marcus used their audience to his advantage. Your soldiers are watching, he said quietly as Zara prepared for another attack. What do you think they see? Zara's eyes flicked briefly to the gathering crowd before snapping back to him. They see their commander eliminating a human pest, do they? Marcus took a step backward, not in retreat but in invitation. Or do they see one of their greatest warriors unable to land a single blow against an unarmed human? Zara's crest flushed a deeper purple, and Marcus felt a moment of satisfaction. Not because he enjoyed her frustration, but because frustration led to mistakes. And mistakes created opportunities for understanding. She attacked with renewed fury, her blade singing through the air in a pattern so complex it seemed like multiple weapons, striking simultaneously. Marcus had seen her use this technique before during their days of observation. It was called the Storm of Blades, and it had never failed to overwhelm an opponent. Marcus did not try to avoid every strike. Instead, he moved through the pattern like a dancer threading between raindrops. When he could not evade, he redirected. When Zara's blade came too close, he used subtle shifts in position to turn a killing blow into a near miss. His grandfather's teachings flowed through him. Yield to overcome, bend to remain straight, be empty to become full. But Marcus was not content to simply defend forever. As Zara's attacks became more desperate, he began to counter not with violence but with revelation. When she overextended on a particularly aggressive thrust, Marcus stepped aside and lightly touched her wrist as she passed. The touch was precise, hitting a nerve cluster that caused her fingers to go momentarily numb. Her blade slipped from her grasp, clattering across the broken ground. Zara spun to face him, expecting a killing blow. Instead, she found Marcus standing calmly 3 paces away, making no move toward the fallen weapon. Pick it up, he said simply. What? Zara's confusion was evident in both her voice and posture. Your blade. Pick it up. Marcus gestured to the weapon. This isn't about defeating you. It's about showing you something. Zara stared at him for a long moment, her enhanced senses searching for any sign of deception or hidden attack. Finding none, she slowly retrieved her weapon, never taking her eyes off the human. Why? She asked. Because honor matters, Marcus replied. Even in war, especially in war. Your people understand this better than most. Around them, the circle of watching soldiers had grown larger. Marcus could see Valdorians and humans standing side by side, their weapons forgotten as they witnessed something none of them had ever seen before. The formal single combat between representatives of warring species was ancient tradition, but this version, where one fighter refused to truly fight, was uncharted territory. Zara attacked again, but something had changed. Her movements were still precise, still deadly, but they lacked the absolute conviction they had possessed before. Marcus could see her thinking now, analyzing not just his defense but his motivations. You could have taken my weapon, she said between strikes. You could have used it against me. I could have, Marcus agreed, flowing around a series of cuts that would have separated his head from his shoulders. But then I would just be another warrior with a blade. I would be proving your point instead of making mine. And what point is that? Zara's attacks were slowing, becoming more thoughtful and less furious. That there's always another way, Marcus said. That the choice to fight or not fight is the most important choice a warrior can make. Marcus began to move differently then, not just evading but actively engaging with Zara's attacks in a way that transformed their duel into something resembling a dance. When she thrust, he guided her blade past him with minimal contact. When she slashed, he moved with the arc of her swing, turning combat into cooperation. "What are you doing?" Zara demanded, though she did not stop fighting. "I'm fighting the way my people learned to fight," Marcus explained. "Not against superior force, but with it. Not trying to destroy what we don't understand, but trying to understand it instead." For the first time, Marcus took the initiative, not to attack but to demonstrate. He moved inside Zara's guard again, but instead of striking, he placed his hands against her arms, following the motion of her blade work. For a moment they moved together in perfect synchronization, two warriors sharing the same space without violence. Then Marcus stepped back, leaving Zara standing alone with her blade raised against empty air. "This is what my grandfather taught me," Marcus said, "that the greatest strength comes not from the ability to destroy but from the ability to preserve. Not from the power to take life, but from the wisdom to protect it." Zara lowered her weapon slowly, her breathing heavy from exertion and confusion. Around them, the circle of watchers had grown silent. Even the distant sounds of battle seemed muted, as if the entire war was holding its breath. "I don't understand," Zara admitted, and for the first time her voice carried uncertainty rather than anger. "That's okay," Marcus said gently. "Understanding takes time. Your people have been warriors for so long that you've forgotten there are other ways to be strong." "Other ways?" Zara's crest tilted, and what Marcus had learned indicated curiosity among her species. The strength to build instead of destroy. The strength to heal instead of harm. The strength to unite instead of conquer. Marcus gestured to the mixed crowd watching them. "Look around you." Humans and Valdorians standing together, weapons down, sharing the same moment. "When was the last time your people experienced something like that?" Zara did look, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. The rigid certainty that had characterized her earlier attacks was cracking, revealing something more complex underneath. "This changes nothing," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "The Empire's mission continues." "We are what we are." "Are you?" Marcus asked. "Or are you what you've been told you have to be?" The question hung in the air between them like a challenge more profound than any blade. Part 5. The crack in the armor Zarathek's world had been built on certainties. The Empire was right. Strength was paramount. Victory justified everything. For 37 years, these truths had been the foundation of her existence, as solid and unchanging as the mountain ranges of her homeworld. Now, standing in the ruins of a human city with her blade trembling in her grip, those certainties felt as fragile as crystal. The human, Marcus, watched her with eyes that held no fear, no hatred, no desire for dominance. Only patience. It was the expression she had never seen directed at her before, and it disturbed her more than any threat could have. "You're trying to break me," she said, though the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. "No," Marcus replied softly. "I'm trying to help you remember who you were before the Empire told you who you had to be." Zara's secondary heart skipped a beat. How could this alien know about the doubts she had buried so deep that she had almost forgotten them herself? The memories came flooding back despite her efforts to suppress them. She had been young, barely past her first molting, when she had discovered the archives in the old section of the Imperial Library. Hidden among the military treatises and conquest records were older texts, ones that spoke of Valdorian culture before the Empire's rise. Stories of her people as explorers and philosophers, as builders of great cities and creators of beautiful art. The young Zara had been fascinated by tales of the wandering courts, groups of Valdorian poets and storytellers who had traveled between the scattered settlements of their homeworld, sharing knowledge and bringing isolated communities together through shared culture rather than conquest. She had spent countless hours reading about the great debates, formal philosophical discussions where the wisest members of different clans would gather to explore questions of meaning and purpose. But when she had asked her instructors about these things, they had dismissed them as ancient weakness, soft thinking, they called it, the failed ways that nearly led to our extinction. They had taught her that only when the Valdorians embraced their warrior nature and united, under the Empire had they become strong enough to survive and expand to the stars. Zara had buried those early fascinations under layers of military training and imperial doctrine. She had told herself that the old ways were indeed weakness, that the Empire's path was the only viable future for her people. But sometimes in quiet moments between battles, she had wondered what those ancient Valdorian philosophers would think of what their descendants had become. Now, facing this human who fought without fighting. Those old questions returned with renewed force. "I am a Valdorian warrior," she said, but the declaration sounded like she was trying to convince herself rather than inform Marcus. "Yes, you are," Marcus agreed. "But is that all you are?" Before Zara could respond, a new voice cut through their conversation. "Commander Zarathek." Both combatants turned to see Sub-Commander Korthvak, pushing through the crowd of watching soldiers. The young male's crest was flushed with anger and confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" Korthvak demanded, his weapon trained on Marcus. "Why do you allow this human to live? Why do our warriors stand idle?" Zara felt the familiar weight of command settle on her shoulders. Korthvak was ambitious, dedicated to imperial doctrine and completely convinced of Valdorian superiority. He represented everything the Empire wanted in a soldier, and everything that Zara was beginning to question. "Stand down, Sub-Commander," she ordered. "This is a formal challenge. Honor demands we let it proceed." "Honor?" Korthvak's voice rose in disbelief. "This human makes a mockery of our traditions. He refuses to fight properly, refuses to die as he should. Where is the honor in this farce?" Marcus stepped forward slightly, drawing Korthvak's attention. "What would honor look like to you, Sub-Commander?" "The strong defeat the weak," Korthvak replied without hesitation. "The superior species conquers the inferior. The Empire expands and the galaxy becomes ordered under Valdorian rule. That is honor. And after?" Marcus asked quietly. "When every world is conquered, every species subjugated, what then? What does a warrior do when there are no more wars to fight?" Korthvak's crest flattened in confusion. It was clearly not a question he had ever considered. "There will always be wars," he said finally. "The weak will always rebel. The strong will always need to maintain order. So eternal war is your goal?" Marcus pressed. "Endless conflict with no purpose except to maintain itself?" "Purpose?" Korthvak laughed harshly. "The purpose is strength. The purpose is survival. The weak deserve to be ruled by the strong." But Zara noticed that some of the Valdorian soldiers in the watching crowd shifted uncomfortably at their sub-commander's words. She had seen that reaction before, in quiet moments when soldiers thought their officers weren't watching. Doubt, carefully hidden but always present. Marcus seemed to notice it too. "And what about those who are strong enough to choose not to rule?" he asked. "Are they weak because they prefer cooperation to domination?" "Impossible," Korthvak declared. "The strong take what they can. It is the natural order, is it?" Marcus turned to address the entire crowd, human and Valdorian alike. "Is strength really about taking? Or is it about having the power to take and choosing not to?" Zara found herself studying the faces around her. The human soldiers looked tired but determined, no longer afraid despite being outnumbered and outgunned. The Valdorian warriors showed a range of expressions she had rarely bothered to notice before, some nodding in agreement with Korthvak, others looking thoughtful, a few appearing almost relieved to hear someone voice questions they had never dared ask themselves. "Commander," Korthvak said urgently, "you must end this. The human seeks to corrupt our warriors with weak thinking. He turns combat into philosophy, strength into doubt." Zara looked at her subordinate, then at Marcus, then at the mixed crowd of soldiers watching them with an attention more intense than any she had seen directed at a formal battle. Something fundamental was happening here, something that went far beyond the outcome of a single duel, or even the fate of one human colony. "Perhaps," she said slowly, "we need to understand why our warriors are so easily corrupted by questions they should have simple answers to." Korthvak's crest went pale with shock. "Commander, you cannot mean—" "I mean that a true warrior faces all challenges," Zara interrupted, "including challenges to what they believe. If our way is truly the strongest, it should be able to withstand examination." She turned back to Marcus, seeing him with new eyes. "Continue your demonstration, human. Show me what strength without weapons truly looks like." Part 6. When Waters Meet Stone. The sound that interrupted their confrontation was one that every soldier, regardless of species, learned to fear: the high-pitched whine of orbital bombardment systems charging for fire. Marcus looked up at the crimson sky where 3 Valdorian heavy cruisers hung like dark birds of prey. Energy was building along their ventral weapon arrays, creating an aurora of deadly light that meant only one thing: someone had decided that the situation on the ground had gone on long enough. "No," Zara breathed. her enhanced vision allowing her to see the targeting systems orienting toward their position. They would not dare. Admiral Thexkar has standing orders, Korthvak said with satisfaction. If any operation exceeds projected timeframes or shows signs of ideological contamination, the area is to be sterilized. Zara's crest went pale. There are Valdorian soldiers in the target zone. Our own people. Acceptable losses, Korthvak replied coldly. The Empire's purity is more important than individual lives. Marcus felt the familiar calm settle over him as he assessed the situation. The bombardment would begin in approximately 90 seconds based on the charge patterns he could see. The nearest shelter was too far away for most of the soldiers to reach in time. Traditional military thinking would demand a desperate scramble for cover, every being for themselves. But traditional thinking had never been Marcus's strength. How many people are in this area? He asked quickly. Zara's expression showed her confusion at his question, but she answered automatically. Approximately 300. 200 Valdorian, 100 human. And how much does Admiral Thexkar value you personally? Was one of his most trusted commanders, Zara said, still staring at the ships above. Marcus nodded and began moving, not toward shelter, but toward the center of the open area where they had been fighting. Then we're going to save everyone, but I need you to trust me. Trust you? Korthvak snarled. The human seeks to use you as a shield. But Zara was watching Marcus's movements, seeing something that her subordinate missed. The human was not trying to hide or flee. Instead, he was positioning himself for maximum visibility from above, making himself the most obvious target possible. What are you doing? She asked. Creating a story that's bigger than any single battle, Marcus replied. But I need your help. The orbital bombardment systems were now at 60% charge. Around them, soldiers of both species were beginning to panic, some running for inadequate cover, others simply staring at the sky in fatalistic acceptance. Marcus raised his hands above his head and began to wave, ensuring that every sensor on the ships above could see him clearly. Then he did something that made every military instinct in the watching crowd rebel. He sat down on the ground, crossed his legs, and closed his eyes in a posture of complete meditation. He's lost his mind, Korthvak declared. The fear has broken him. But Zara understood. Marcus was not giving up. He was making a statement. He was demonstrating absolute faith in something beyond the power of orbital weapons. The bombardment systems reached 75% charge. Commander Zarathek, Marcus said quietly, his eyes still closed. Your people came here to conquer. But what if they could accomplish something greater? What if they could choose to be something more than conquerors? Zara looked around at the mixed crowd of soldiers, human and Valdorian, all staring at the small human sitting calmly in the center of certain death. She saw fear in many faces, but also something else. Wonder. Awe. The recognition that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Without fully understanding why, Zara found herself walking toward Marcus. Her blade clattered to the ground as she dropped it. She sat down beside him, her 7-foot frame making his seem even smaller by comparison. What are you doing? Korthvak demanded, his voice rising to a near shriek. Choosing, Zara replied simply. 85% charge. Above them, the fleet had clearly noticed the unusual behavior of their ground forces. The charging sequence slowed as orbital observers tried to understand what they were seeing. One by one, other soldiers began to follow Zara's example. First a young Valdorian private, then an older human sergeant, then more and more until the entire crowd was sitting in concentric circles around Marcus and Zara. Weapons were set aside. Helmets were removed. Traditional enemies sat shoulder to shoulder, no longer soldiers but simply beings sharing an impossible moment. Marcus opened his eyes and looked at Zara. This is what I've been trying to show you. Real strength isn't the power to destroy. It's the power to inspire. The power to help others choose to be better than they thought they could be. The orbital bombardment systems reached 90% charge. Then something unprecedented happened. The charging sequence stopped. A communication beam from the flagship struck the ground near them, and Admiral Thexkar's voice echoed across the battlefield. Commander Zarathek, explain your current situation. Zara stood slowly, her hand finding the communication device at her belt. When she spoke, her voice carried across the gathered crowd and up to the ships above. Admiral, I am engaged in learning something that our military academies never taught us. I am learning what it means to be strong enough to choose peace over victory. Silence stretched across the communications channel. Around the circle, 300 soldiers held their breath. Explain. Thexkar's voice was carefully neutral. This human has demonstrated that true strength is not the ability to destroy one's enemies, but the ability to transform them into allies. He has shown that the greatest conquests are not of territory, but of understanding. Zara paused, looking around at the faces watching her. Admiral, what if the Empire's greatest expansion could come not from taking new worlds, but from inspiring other species to join us willingly? Another long silence. When Thexakar spoke again, his voice carried a note that Zara had never heard from him before. Uncertainty. And you believe this human has demonstrated such a possibility? Zara looked down at Marcus, who gave her one of his strange, tooth-bearing expressions of encouragement. I believe he has shown us that we have been thinking too small, Admiral. We have been content to rule through fear when we could lead through inspiration. The orbital bombardment systems powered down completely. Very well, Commander. I will hear this human's proposal. But understand, the Empire's patience is not infinite. Marcus stood, brushing dust from his uniform, and activated his own communication device. Admiral Thexkar, my name is Marcus Chen. I propose something that has never been attempted in known galactic history. An alliance between equals, built not on conquest but on mutual respect and shared growth. Impossible, came Thexkar's immediate response. The Empire does not negotiate with inferiors. Then perhaps, Marcus said quietly, it's time to discover that there are no inferiors. Only beings who have not yet been shown how to be their best selves. Part 7. The Strength to Choose. 6 months later, Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the research station jointly constructed in the asteroid belt between human and Valdorian space. Through the transparent aluminum windows, he could see ships from both fleets working side by side, their crews learning to communicate not through weapons but through shared purpose. The transformation had not been immediate or without setbacks. Admiral Thexkar had required extensive convincing, countless demonstrations and several heated debates with the Imperial Council before agreeing to the experimental cultural exchange initiative. Many on both sides had dismissed it as weakness disguised as diplomacy, but the results spoke for themselves. The footsteps approaching behind him were distinctive, heavier than human, with the subtle sound of scaled feet on metal decking. Marcus turned to see Zara entering the observation lounge, no longer wearing the aggressive battle armor of an Imperial commander, but the more practical uniform of the newly formed Interspecies Cooperation Division. The morning reports, she said, handing him a data tablet. 3 more worlds have expressed interest in joining the Alliance. 2 human colonies and 1 independent Zenithian settlement. Marcus accepted the tablet but did not immediately look at it. Instead, he studied Zara's face, noting the changes that had occurred over the past months. The permanent tension that had once characterized her expression had eased. Her crest, which had once been either flattened in anger or raised in aggression, now often displayed the more relaxed posture that indicated contentment among her people. How are the integration programs proceeding? He asked. Better than expected, Zara admitted. The young Valdorians adapt quickly to collaborative thinking. It is the older commanders who struggle with the concept of strength through cooperation rather than domination. Marcus nodded. Change was always difficult for those who had invested their entire identity in old ways of thinking. And Korthvak? Zara's expression grew more complex. Still convinced that we are weakening the Empire through soft thinking, but even he cannot argue with the practical results. Our combined research teams have made advances in the past 6 months that neither species achieved in decades of separate development. It was true. The fusion of Valdorian engineering prowess with human innovation had produced breakthroughs in energy efficiency, medical technology, and space travel that neither species had imagined possible. More importantly, the collaborative work had created bonds between individuals that were proving stronger than traditional species loyalties. There's something else, Zara continued, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that Marcus had learned to recognize as her way of approaching difficult topics. I've been reviewing the old archives again, the ones I discovered as a youngling but abandoned during my military training. Marcus waited patiently. Zara had mentioned these archives before but had never gone into detail about their contents. My people were not always conquerors, she said finally. Before the Empire, before the Great Unification Wars, we were explorers, philosophers. We traveled between worlds not to conquer them, but to learn from them. The warrior culture that now defines us was originally just one aspect of who we were, not the totality of our identity. And now? Marcus prompted gently. Now I wonder what we lost when we decided that strength could only mean the ability to destroy. Zara moved to stand beside him at the window, watching the mixed crews working together in the void of space. Your demonstration on Zerion Prime showed me something I had forgotten. That the greatest strength is the ability to create rather than destroy, to unite rather than divide. Marcus considered her words carefully. Your people are not weak for having chosen the warrior path, Zara. Strength takes many forms. The key is knowing when to use each form appropriately. Is that what you call it? Zara asked with what Marcus had learned was the Valdorian equivalent of a smile. A slight raising of her crest combined with a relaxation of her facial features. Appropriate use of strength? Among other things, Marcus replied. My grandfather called it wu-wei, action through non-action. Accomplishing goals not by forcing them but by creating conditions where they can emerge naturally. Like what happened on Zerion Prime, Zara mused. You did not force me to question my beliefs. You simply created a situation where questioning became inevitable. Something like that, Marcus agreed. Though I should point out that you made the choice to question. I just provided the opportunity. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the ongoing work outside. A human engineering team was installing new power coupling systems designed by Valdorian scientists, while Valdorian construction crews followed architectural plans created by human designers. It was a level of cooperation that would have been unthinkable just months before. Marcus, Zara said eventually, there is something I need to tell you. The Imperial Council has been interested in expanding the Cultural Exchange Initiative. They are considering applying our collaborative model to relationships with other species. Marcus felt a surge of cautious optimism. That's excellent news. Yes, but they want to put me in charge of the expansion, Zara continued. As the primary liaison for interspecies cooperation, it would mean leaving this station, traveling throughout the galaxy, essentially becoming an ambassador for a completely new way of thinking about galactic civilization. Marcus turned to face her fully. And how do you feel about that? Terrified, Zara admitted without hesitation. For most of my life, I knew exactly who I was and what I was supposed to do. Now I am being asked to help redefine what it means to be Valdorian, what it means to be strong, what it means to interact with other species. The responsibility is overwhelming, but, Marcus prompted, sensing there was more. But also exhilarating, Zara continued, her crest rising slightly with what Marcus had learned indicated excitement. For the first time in my adult life, I feel like I am doing something that truly matters. Not just maintaining the status quo or expanding territory, but actually helping to build something better. Marcus reached out and placed a hand on her arm, a gesture that would have been unthinkable between their species just months before. You'll do well, Zara. You have something that many leaders lack, the courage to admit when you might be wrong and the strength to change when you discover a better way. And you? Zara asked. What will you do? The Council has indicated that they would welcome human advisors for this expansion. Marcus looked out at the stars visible beyond the working spacecraft, considering the question. I think I'll continue doing what I've always done, trying to find ways to solve problems without creating new ones. Whether that's here on New Worlds or wherever the path leads. The path of water, Zara said, remembering his earlier explanation of his philosophy. The path of water, Marcus agreed, persistent, patient, and always finding a way forward. As they watched, a new ship emerged from hyperspace near the station, a Zenithian vessel with elegant curves and crystalline hull sections that caught and refracted the local star's light into rainbow patterns. It was the first of what they hoped would be many species choosing to join their alliance of equals. Look at that, Zara said softly. 6 months ago, I would have seen that ship as either a potential conquest or a potential threat. Now I see it as a potential friend. That, Marcus said with satisfaction, is the most powerful transformation of all. Not changing what you can do, but changing how you choose to see the universe around you. Together, they watched as the Zenithian ship approached the station, its crew ready to begin the next phase of what Historians would later call the Great Cooperation, the period when the galaxy species finally learned that their greatest strength lay not in conquering each other, but in discovering what they could build together. The battle that had brought them together was over. The harder but more rewarding work of building a better future was just beginning.